Okay, this is part 10 of the Seminole War Heritage Trail. This is my last historical outfit, so it's going to be modern Seminole clothing for the next couple videos. So, anyway, talking about the Seminole War Heritage Trail, a booklet published by the Florida Department of State, and it'll be in the notes and down below where you can download a copy of the booklet. And it's the 10th anniversary of the booklet. So once again, I'm going over sites that may have changed in those 10 years. Things have been added, things have disappeared, and I'm going over West Central Florida for this part, which get the map out. It'll be in the purple area. This part of the program, I'm covering Polk County and Hillsborough, Pinellas County. So that's the last part of West Central Florida, and there's a lot of sites and a lot of places to see, as you can see all those little yellow tiles. So let's begin. The first part, we're going back to somebody who I mentioned in the last video, Chief Chipko, and in Lake Hamilton. If you go down, I think it's Highway 27 or 17 in Polk County near Lake Hamilton. There's Chief Chipko Park here, and there's a little monument commemorating him. And I think there's a interpretive sign or something around here. Anyway, a little known site, but well worth a visit. Also in Polk County is Fort Cummings. Let me see if I can find out more information on that. Fort Cummings, when the Army had a meeting with Coacachee in 1841, they established this um, fort to meet with him, and Coacachee and his warriors show up in the costumes from the theatrical troupe that they had raided the previous, I believe, is month of May in 1840 in near St. Augustine. So they showed up looking like King Lear or Coacachee with the turban of uh, Othello. So anyway, stop trying to pronounce the Shakespeare names. So this is Lake Alfred in Polk County. Some of these are not going to be in the best of order, but I'm trying to cover them real fast. Now, if you're going to Lake Kissimmee State Park down Camp Mack Road, there's another historical marker for Fort Gardner, which is established during Zachary Taylor's campaign that led down to the Battle of Okeechobee. And I think this marker is still here. One of these markers has been moved. This might still be along Camp Mack Road. It's along the highway that eventually ends at Lake Kissimmee State Park, named after Dr. John Gardner, who was killed with Major Dade's command. Another fort in Polk County. Oh, not there yet. Um, this is Camp Blount, more a third Seminole War marker. Here's a close-up of it. Or Fort Blount in Bartow. This is right in front of the courthouse, the old courthouse in Bartow. Now, if you go to the old courthouse, it's also the county history museum. It has a good exhibit on the Seminole War and the Seminoles. I did some genealogy research in here and actually found some obituary of an ancestor of mine. Fort Carroll is named after Sergeant Major Francis Carroll, who was killed near Micanopy or Wakahuta in December 28th, 1840, 5 years after Major Dade. And so this fort was built, named after him, but in the 7th Infantry, built January 22nd, 1841. Kind of interesting is this is about one of the few forts that's named after an enlisted soldier, Sergeant Major Francis Carroll. Also in Polk County, I think this is near Haines City, Fort Frazier. Let me check real quick. Oh, from US 98 from Bartow to Lakeland, Fort Fraser, not Winter Haven. Kind of neat about Fort Fraser. There's a trail here, kind of a biking trail, and you can see the trail right behind the historical marker. Fort Fraser, we actually have a drawing of it by James Buchanan. I think Florida Historical Quarterly published his journal uh, back around 2000. Um, and here's one of the bridges, the Fort Fraser Trail. So definitely worth checking out. And here's another sign about Fort Fraser. Sorry about the pixelating. This kind of the only good sign picture that I could find of the sign. Okay, going back to Fort Meade in South Polk County, not far from Bowling Green, which is uh, for another episode here. Fort Meade has Heritage Park, which was the location of Seminole War Fort Meade. It was kind of between the wars and the Third Seminole War. They have a historical marker named after, of course, Lieutenant George Meade, who later became famous in charge of the Union forces at the Battle of Gettysburg. There's a playground on the park. Part of where the fort used to be extends a cemetery next door, Evergreen Cemetery, and I actually have an ancestor buried there. My great-great-grandfather who looked up his obituary in Bartow back there and got frozen out during the Great Freeze in 1895 that I mentioned in the last episode. Um, Also in Fort Meade, but it's kind of a residential area. You'll have to plug in the navigation. I think it's off of Orange Avenue or Orange Street. Oh, this is still Fort Meade. Okay. They like to mention that Stonewall Jackson was here at Fort Meade, but it was a very contentious time in his military career. So, back then they wouldn't have put up a monument to him. Um, yeah, but further south in kind of one of the residential areas is this park. It has this obelisk, and by the obelisk, these are actually gravestones. There's like five people buried here who were killed around the Battle of the Peace River or the Tillis Farm battle. One of them is um, like the governor's former Florida governor's grandfather, but um, this was the largest battle of the Third Seminole War, where they were killed in June of 1856. So going over to Hillsborough County, stop off in Fort Foster, and they recently did some renovation there, back in service. Take the tour when you can. They usually don't let people just wander there, so you have to go ahead and take the tour to visit the fort. So that's pretty neat. Many fond memories of camping out here. I've actually slept in the blockhouse there, um, and outside in the woods too. Okay, near Hillsborough River State Park is the Fort King Trail. The old roadway is now a rails to trails uh, pathway, a multi-use pathway. Part of it's paved, part of it's just a dirt path. Here you can see a map from the kiosk of the actual trail where it goes. It follows partway along Highway 301, then goes in the park. There's, I think, a John Sargent Park, and in the north part is Hillsborough River State Park. I think the gray line might be the original Fort King Road. Oh, Fort Foster up there. And this is a historical marker not far away in Thanotosassa, which means place of Flint, Flint place, or place where there's flint. In fact, I've probably driven by here a bunch of times and never noticed the marker. Uh, get a close-up of that. That's a military road, Fort Brooke to Fort King is what the marker says by the Tampa chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, 1928. The Daughters of the American Revolution put up a lot of these historical markers back in the 1920s. So we're getting at this point now, it's a century since they put a lot of them up. Now, if you're in Tampa, you gotta visit this. This is a spectacular museum, the Tampa Bay History Center, about 4 stories of the levels that you can see of the history of Tampa Bay. I don't know if this was when it was under construction or what. Almost looks like it has scaffolding, but where did I grab this picture from? But anyway, Fort Brooke, of course, was established in 1824, was the largest military reservation that the United States had at the time. At one point covered up to 20 miles around Tampa Bay area or north of Tampa. In fact, Major Dade, his first day, where he only marched 5 miles, they actually didn't leave the military reservation until the next day after they'd camped out. And uh, now nearby at the Tampa College, the former Flagler Hotel, there's two of these 24-pounder cannons, which were original artillery pieces that were at Fort Brooke, that the Confederates dumped them in the Hillsborough River to make sure the Yankees didn't get them. And years later, they fished them out and put them here at the park. There's also, don't have a picture, there's an Endicott gun from Fort Dade that was on Egmont Key that was moved here to the park. And originally, that Endicott gun or disappearing gun, they mounted it on a barbette carriage. The gun was originally at Boyer in Fort Morgan in Mobile Bay. That's a long story. I used to work at Fort Morgan, so that's why I know about that. Now, of course, here's one of the different pictures we have of Fort Brooke from the Seminole War era. And this is Fort Brooke during its final days in the 1880s, the old officers' quarters here from an old postcard. The fort was finally abandoned in the 1880s, and then a large legal battle ensued that went to about 1905 on who exactly should get ownership of Fort Brooke. Because when the Army moved in, they declared eminent domain and took it from a Mr. Hackley. And so his uh, children or survivors were trying to get back the property for like the next 80 years until finally the Supreme Court decided that it was government property. This is a model of Fort Brooke along the waterway. This is inside the Tampa Bay History Center. Give you a sneak peek. Now, they have some excellent exhibits on the Seminole War, even a multimedia movie animatronic production of Kawakachi and when he was captured at held prisoner at Fort Brooke. And there's historical markers of Fort Brooke all over this part of town. I'm not going to cover them all because it kind of gets a little ridiculous on some of them because one says Andrew Jackson, but Andrew Jackson didn't have any part of Fort Brooke. This is in the parking garage nearby when they bulldozed the area that Fort Brooke used to be, and they put up this plaque, which looks kind of neat. In 1982, when they originally dug down here, they found the graves of several Seminoles that were buried uh, at Fort Brooke alongside the soldiers, and the Seminole tribe took them and reburied them at another place in Tampa, and that's where the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel is today, next to Fort Brooke. And this is a really neat Khotan Chobe Park, Fort Brooke Park. This is like out the back door at Fort Brooke, right on the waterway. This is the beginning of the Trail of Tears for the Seminole on the west coast of Florida from Fort Brooke to Oklahoma. There's a monument here commemorating, and there's you'll see these little bronze plaques on the side telling about the Seminoles being taken from their home in Florida. And so that's a excellent memorial. This was a dream we had years ago, and when they built the Tampa Bay History Center and established this memorial, it's very fitting that they put that here. Here's another historical marker. One I want to mention, Fort Brooke Cemetery was in this area. Uh, about when they found the Seminole burials. It seems like every time they break ground this part of Tampa, they find another cemetery, and sometimes they f find more Seminole burials. The recent one was about 5 years ago, and the main old cemetery right around here is Oak Lawn Cemetery. It has many of the people who were at Fort Brooke, settlers and Native Americans. There's this kind of a mass grave, I think from the mass burial here, and next to it, there you'll see that little stone area. There's a plaque in honor of the Native Americans buried here as well. Um, and of course, victims of the yellow fever epidemics that were here at Fort Brooke. So here's another grave, and this is not in downtown Tampa like what I just showed you. This is just along a regular street in Florida. This is John Carney, and this is actually in somebody's yard. He was killed during the Seminole War, soldier of, think it says Florida militia, and he was just buried on the spot. They had an older tombstone that either got stolen or destroyed, so they got a VA stone here. You can look up John Carney on Find a Grave and drive by and see it. It's not, I wouldn't recommend stopping since it's somebody's front yard where this is at. Now, the last place in the west central Florida I mentioned is Egmont Key, and this was Fort Dade in the early 1900s as part of the coastal defense for the Endicott. But this was an island that was used to hold the Seminole prisoners from Fort Brooke. During the Third Seminole War, it was established as a prisoner prison to hold the Seminoles there by Colonel Gustavus Loomis. And of course, the structures or remains you can see are Fort Dade, the later period during the early 1900s. The only way to get here is by boat, either take a chartered boat from the park or get a canoe or sailboat or however you go there, and you can see the old streets and foundations of the building. They also have a lighthouse there. Egmont Key is disappearing. The rising tide is vastly quickly taking away the parts of the island. Some of the old concrete Endicott batteries are washing away. So if you get a chance to see it, I'd see it while it still exists. So that's between Hillsborough County and Pinellas County at the mouth of the Tampa Bay. So that's the last spot I have for West Central Florida. And so next time I think we'll go to South Florida. So I'll talk to you later. And that's Fort Foster and one of the reenactments behind me. Uh, okay, let's end this session and I'll see you back on part 11. I'm going to try ended at part 11 and 12. So let's hope I don't have to do any more than that. So this would pretty much cover for uh, through the end of November.